There are 3 types of sales trainers out there, and they're all lying to you on what actually closes high-ticket sales in 2025. Type 1 is we have the OG old school killers. These are people like Grant Cardone, Jordan Belfort. They made all their monies back in the 80s and 90s, and they're going to tell you to be aggressive, always be pushing, and never take no for an answer. Type 2 is we have like the new old school. These are people like Jeremy Miner and Cole Gordon, which yes, they did improve on the old school model, but with the market moving as quick as it does, their methods became quickly outdated as well. And then type 3 is we have the new sales guru. These are just marketers who slap a fancy name on a basic sales technique, they package it, and then they sell it to you as something new. I'll go over why none of those actually work and why they're actually costing you deals. Look, I've generated over $8 million in high ticket sales myself, and my highest month as a high ticket closer, I made over $62,000 in straight commissions. You have to understand, today's buyers are well educated, they are informed, and they smell manipulation from a mile away. Doesn't matter who taught you the manipulation. So in this video, I'm breaking down exactly why those methods I mentioned just no longer make sense, and I'll be going over that identity-based framework that has closers who use it closing 50 to 70% of their sales calls in today's market. Let's dive into it. Okay, so like I mentioned, we have these 3 types of sales trainers out there. We got the old school guys, we have the new old school, and then we have the marketers and the gurus out there, which again, there's so many of these guys, it's hard to really tie them down, but they're pretty much all the same. So why don't they work if you actually want to be elite? Because when we're talking about these sales tactics, it all comes around the belief of if we want to be elite at sales, we can't follow what these people are saying. If we want to close at 20, 30, maybe even stretching it to 40%, then it's like, yes, some of their tactics, again, and some of their styles will work. But if we want to be closing at 70, 80, and even 90% of the people they're talking to, I'll show you why they don't actually work if we want to be elite. Okay, so first things first is the old school guys. So information has become unlimited. Because that, prospects are skeptical. If you think that you can just fool people into buying, like that time is done. Buyers now research everything before the calls. Traditional scarcity tactics like price is only available today, or the big one that still is around in the high ticket space is, hey, if we can take care of it on the call today, I'll give you a $1,000, $2,000 discount. But if we hop off the call and I have to do follow-up, the price is going to go up. These tactics do not work. If anything, they break the trust that you have built up, if you did build up any trust in the discovery process. Because successful people, they buy from equals and authorities, not from people trying to dominate them and not from people trying to manipulate or trick them. Okay, so that is the old school guys. Now, the new old school tactics. Understand, like these tactics, they came out like right around when like COVID happened, when the high ticket space like first started emerging. Now, since it was better than the old school guys, like everyone started using them and they started getting results. Okay, when this stuff like really worked, it was just after COVID. Interest rates were super low. Okay, and everyone was getting approved for financing and everyone had stimulus checks. So when you hear people talk about results of, back in 2021, 2022, and even like going into 2023, just understand like it's hard to take those results at face value just because the market has changed so much from now versus then. Now, like again, interest rates are much higher, not as many people are getting approved, and people's buying decisions back in the day, like, because again, I was selling during that time. Everyone was buying. You didn't even have to be that good at sales. Nowadays, it's much harder to get people across the line if you're just focusing on the basic sales conversations, which typically in the new old school, that's what they do. It's too rigid and they don't have a deep understanding of why they're actually asking certain questions. Because again, we know we need to ask questions in our sales conversations, but if you don't understand the why, then again, it's too rigid and we're just going on the next question on our process or on our script. Okay, so it focuses on surface level leverage, like basically pains and what they're going through right now to get people across the line, which again can work for 30% of the people. But if we want to close 90% of the people, we need to get deeper leverage and we need to understand why we're asking things and have a deeper psychology around it. Okay. Now, last is we have the marketers. So these are basically just repackaged versions of the first 2 groups with new cool names. For example, scriptless selling. Now, I'm going to go on a bit of a diatribe right now. We're talking about scriptless selling. From what I can see, and again, there's a few of them out there who sell scriptless selling. It's basically Cole Gordon's framework repackaged, where they're basically saying like, hey, what's your biggest challenge right now? You understand what their current situation is, you chunk down, and then you get into pain. But again, you don't follow a script. You just have basic frameworks of questions that you have memorized that then you ask. But if you're going to go through, let's say, Cole Gordon's training, which I did, and I have problems with it, he's going to tell you like, hey, here are the questions you ask, make sure you memorize it, and then talk to the person that you're having, okay? Have the conversation you're having, talk to the person who's in front of you. Now, him saying that's bad because it's a script. But the scriptless selling is, I'm going to give you those same types of questions, just memorize it, and then just have the conversation you're having. Don't have the script up. Now it's scriptless selling, right? Again, it's just a new name for the same old thing. It's not anything new. It's just repackaged Cole Gordon's from what I can see, right? Hey, what's your biggest challenge right now? Understand what's been going on in your situation. Let's dive into the pain. The next one that I see, and this is going to be pretty prevalent, is like they just focus on like one part of the sales process, and they tell you that's the only part that matters. The biggest one that I see is like, hey, objection handling is the only part that matters, which in my head is crazy. Because yes, if you get really good at objection handling, like you can close like 30, maybe even 40% of the people that you're talking to, but you're going to have a hard time closing 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% of people you're talking to if we just focus on bullying people into buying, okay? So what these things miss as far as like the repackaged stuff is it doesn't actually add anything deeper, and it's just repackaged stuff that was before that, again, have become outdated. Now, here's what actually works today. And this is something to where, again, I've gone through all these different trainings. I spent over $50,000 in sales training personally. The thing that I found that works at the highest level is going to be selling to identity. Okay. So key principles that you have to understand. Now, Tony Robbins is probably one of the most influential people of our lifetime. He is a billionaire life coach. Why most people are broke being life coaches, because his ability to persuade, he's been able to outperform all of them. And he is saying here that the strongest force in the human personality is the need to stay consistent with themselves, like how they define themselves. So when somebody sees himself as successful, as an entrepreneur, they act like one. When they see themselves as being stuck, they continue to be stuck. Your job isn't to convince them to buy. Your job is to help them to see themselves differently, step into a different identity. Because when we're talking about a lot of these sales techniques, just understand what's the foundation that these sales techniques are built on. Most of them are built on NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So if you look at this pyramid here is the NLP pyramid that shows the higher up you go, the more leverage you have. So if you're really trying to change somebody, which NLP, that's what they focus on. And that's what we focus on in sales, changing people for the better. The higher up you go, the more leverage you have. Because what most salespeople do is they focus on behaviors, skills, and sometimes they get into beliefs, right? Like, what are you currently doing now? And what do you not know, right? That's causing your problems. And what are you doing right now that's hurting you? And what are the skills you have right now that, or you don't have, that's hurting you? Or sometimes they'll get in beliefs as like, hey, like, where does that come from? But really what we need to do is we need to be able to get into the identity level. Why? Because if we get into the identity level, number one, that's the highest leverage. But if I'm able to shift someone's identity or talk about somebody's identity, if I'm able to shift it and align it to where they need to go, their beliefs, their skills, their behavior, and their environment all goes with the identity. Because if you are a successful entrepreneur, this is how you see yourself. Your beliefs will be that of a successful entrepreneur. Your skills will be that. Your behavior and your environment will follow through. Okay? So instead of just creating fake urgency through scarcity, you have to create real urgency through identity gaps. People want to stay consistent with how they see themselves. Okay. So instead of saying like, hey, if you don't buy today, I'm going to charge you $2,000 tomorrow extra. Again, how much longer do you want to be the person who you have been versus the person who you need to be? Okay. Instead of basic canned questions, understand people on a deeper level. Understand why you ask the questions. And instead of behavior and skills deficiencies, focus on who they need to become. So I can give you a few different examples when it comes to this. I'll give one from me, and then I'll give one for one of the conversations my student ran into. So for me, when we're talking about if you were to sell me something, you can sit here and talk about the skills and competencies I don't have, or the behavior that, again, I'm not living up to, or like I'm not doing that might not be getting me the results I want. But if you really want to tap into me, like my deep self, understand the identity of which I have. Okay. Because for me personally, I grew up in a place that didn't have extraordinary people. Mediocre was the normal. And that shit scared the fuck out of me. So I do everything now to not be mediocre, to be extraordinary. So that's my identity of somebody who does things above the norm, somebody who does things extraordinary. So if you hopped on a call with me, whatever it is you're selling, and you're going to sit here and show me how what I'm doing now is falling short of the person who I need to be. And what you're doing and what you're selling is actually that bridge to becoming that extraordinary person. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, like, I'm buying. Here's another thing, right? Here's an example from an actual call review that I did with a client earlier this week. And this is a trap that you can fall into if you're just focusing on skills, beliefs, and behavior. He got to the end. He had a pretty good discovery. Now, he's new and he's working on it, so he didn't dive too much into the identity and the discovery. So when he got to the end of the sales conversation, what was happening is he was getting a ton of objections. Now, it was money was the big one, but the real underlying belief was skepticism. He didn't know if it would work. But the thing that kept coming up was not the belief, but the identity of I am a skeptical person. Okay. And it was never addressed of I'm a skeptical person. Like, that was never shift of him being a skeptical person versus him being the person who has the freedom. One of these people have to die. Okay. You can't have both. So what happened was, in the objection handling process, he was just focused on the skills he didn't have, some of the beliefs around him being skeptical, and his behaviors. He never touched the identity. So he never had the actual leverage to get him across the line. So it didn't matter what we did down here. Okay, whether we address his beliefs, his skills, his behavior, or even his environment. If he sees himself as a skeptical person, he is never going to do things that is different than him being a skeptical person. He is going to have the beliefs, the actions, the behavior, everything's going to align with him being a skeptical person. So in those situations, what you need to do is you need to shift their identity from being a skeptical person to being a person who has that level of freedom that they're looking for. Okay, so how do you actually do that, right? I'm sure you're asking, okay? So there's a 6-step identity gap framework sequence, okay? So this is how we break it down. So very first and foremost, this is what we're going to do in discovery. Now, once we're diving in, we understand their situation, we need to start to shift the conversation to identity. Why do you want to shift it to identity? Understand every single person you're talking to, they're wearing a mask. So if you're able to actually talk to their current self or their self who they need to be, that's when you're able to get the below the mask and have a real conversation. So step one, we need to get them to admit their current identity. So once we dive into pain, once we dive into their goal, right? Like, you're going to ask something along these lines. Now, there's tons of ways to ask it, but I'll just give you the simplest ways just so you can wrap your head around it. Like, where does that drive come from to change? So something like that, they're going to tell you where that drive comes from. Let's say, for example, you're selling a biz op and you ask them like, okay, where does that drive to change come from? It's like, oh, like, I just want to be like a better dad. You'll get into that. Or like, I want to be more successful. I know I'm meant for something more. I've always felt I'm meant for something more. Like, that's an identity. Once we get to the identity, okay, we need to find the limiting belief that's kept them stuck, because there is a story that they've been telling themselves of why they're not successful. So in order to really attach the current identity to the belief that's been holding them back, that's what we need to find first. We need to find that belief. So you're going to ask them like, hey, what's prevented you internally from solving this? Like, what's it prevented you internally from actually finding the help so you could get outcome? Okay. You need to get a belief. Beliefs are going to be internal thoughts that are inside of their control that's been holding them back. Maybe they've been too comfortable. Maybe they felt that they could do it on their own. Maybe it's just not been a priority. These are beliefs, and these are things that are internally that is holding them back. Once we find out internally what's holding them back, then we're going to bridge into the identity, okay? So it's not about being the type of person. It's about being the type of person who naturally gets these results, okay? Yes, it's skills, but it's about being the person who can get the outcome. So step 3 is we need to bridge into identity. I'm always going to bridge into identity the same way. I'm always going to say, hey, and the reason why I ask is I can give somebody the perfect diet plan, but if they don't have the right mentality to use it, like, what type of results do they get? Right? Not good, right? So yes, it's about the skills, but it's also about being the type of person who naturally gets the results. Because if you're that 20,000 per month person, you walk differently, right? Like you have a different level of confidence about you. You know what I mean? It's just right now we're this person. Is that right? So then from there, I'm bridging into identity and I'm laying the foundation. Hey, like we need to be this person, but right now we're this person. I create that gap. Then step 4 is I need to make that gap painful. Okay. So I'm going to say things like, are you okay staying that person? Why not? After that, step 5 is I need to create urgency through consequences. Where are you in 2 years if we stay the same? If we stay that same person, how is that going to feel? And then step 6, you need to position yourself as the identity bridge. Okay, this is going to be important to where, again, you're not selling a program, you're selling a transformation. So here are things that help you bypass the logical mind. Here are some questions that you can use to bypass the logical mind and actually get behind this guy's mask. You can ask questions like, what type of person do you see yourself as right now? What's the cost of you staying the person who you are right now? How much longer do you want to be this version of yourself? Okay. These are questions you can sprinkle in and you can start adding right away without putting the whole framework in, and you'll start having more real conversations. Now, why does this work better than just handling objections? Because when you do this and you have real conversations, objections rarely come up because they're not deciding to buy your product. They're deciding on who they want to be as a person. And if objections do come up, they're easily bypassable. Okay. This shortens your call time and makes you have real conversations. Why you go and loop after loop after loop in objection handling is because you're not talking to them. You're not talking to the real person. So there are 3 identity levels as a closer. So understand when we're tapping into other people's identities, we need to up level our identity first in order to do that at a high level. Okay. Because there are 3 types of levels for salespeople. Number 1, we have the salesperson identity. This is where most people get stuck. They focus on making the sale, they operate from scarcity and need, and they're worried about objections. They're maybe closing 10 to 20%. So if the prospect is a lock, this is a hammer. Sometimes the lock is weak enough, it breaks it. Level 2 is we have the consultant identity. Now, this is better. They're focused on problem solving. They operate from knowledge, expertise. And again, they help prospects make good decisions, but they never actually tap into the transformation that people need to make. And again, they're key. They close 20 to 40%. On some locks, this will work. They're not just hammering things, but for an overwhelming majority of people, because we're not talking about the real stuff, the transformation, they're not able to get them across the line. Okay. Then we have the transformation guide. This is when we focus on identity transformation. We operate from abundance and certainty, and we're unattached from the outcome. We genuinely care about the prospect's highest good. And this is when we can start closing 50 to 90%. We're lockpick. So no matter what lock is in front of us, we can actually have that conversation, overcome their objections, okay, or whatever is coming up, pre-handle their concerns and get these people across the line. So how do we actually make this shift ourselves? So you need to stop being needy for the commissions. The less you need to sell, the more likely you're actually able to get it. You need to actually operate from genuine abundance and a belief in transformation. Now, that's easier said than done. So key focus, be comfortable. Okay, your body, your mind will follow. So even if in your head you're screaming and you're nervous, if you slow your body down and you move like you're underwater, your mind will calm down too. And the person who is more comfortable is the person who is more confident. So comfort equals confidence. So if you're comfortable in these conversations, you're going to come across as more confident, more of an authority, and you're able to help shift people's perspective. 2 or 3, care more about their success than your commission checks. Actually care about people. 4 is we need to step into the elite identity before helping others do the same. If you know you need to do things, if you know you need to invest in yourself, if there's something that is holding you back from getting your goals and you're not doing it, you're going to have a hard time sitting across from somebody else and getting them to take a change. Okay, so here's an actual real life example so you know I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. Okay, this is the example of James. So he's one of my clients, and when James first came to me, he was making $5K per month and he wanted to hit $25K per month consistently. The real issue he had is he didn't see himself as a leader. Okay, he was scared to lead because how he actually saw himself. So we had to have the conversation to help shift how he was performing to actually step into that leader. And not only did he hit over 25K per month, he hits 40,000 per month consistently. That's how powerful this stuff is. You'll blow whatever it is your goals out of the water if you truly master it. All right, cool. Hopefully that was helpful. I just showed you exactly why the sales training methods before are dead and gave you the exact identity-based framework that you need to be closing 50 to 90% of the prospects you talk to. These are exact same methods that Peter here has used to go from $15,000 per month to over $47,000 per month in just 2 months of us working together. But here is the hard reality. You can try to do this by yourself and you can spend thousands of dollars on different sales training and spend countless hours reading different psychology textbooks and watching different psychology lectures just like I had. Or you can get hands-on help from me where I work with you one-on-one, where I implement exactly what I teach here into exactly what you're selling so you don't have to make the same mistakes. If you're ready, check out the first link in the description. If not, go ahead, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.